Welcome to week 3. Big day for us today because we are making the transition to value, to light and shadow. So I hope you've been finding some success in finding the construction of your subject. I hope you've been enjoying it. It's okay if you still find it frustrating because we're going to keep on that. But today is our discussion about moving into light and shadow. And so we've talked about how challenging working from life can be, and so to make that point, let me talk to you about a situation that's a particular challenge to really drop you into the refiner's fire. Because for me, when you do a demonstration, it's a tough thing because a live demonstration, you never do your very best work. You don't have the concentration, you don't have the concentrated studio environment that you're used to. And yet, you really need to come out the other side with a drawing or painting that you're proud of. All these people come by and want to have a look here at Comic-Con. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to go to Comic-Con. It's a lot of fun. It's a spectacle. It's a romp. And so every year I'm down there. I do a few demos here and there. And so you've got to come out the other side with something that was worth these people's time. Standing there for an hour, maybe an hour and a half while I'm doing my drawing. They could be over at the Capcom booth playing video games, which might be a whole lot more exciting than what I'm doing. So the last thing in the world I want is for all these people to grab their cell phone and tweet or text all their other friends at Comic-Con saying, don't bother going to Nathan's next demo. It wasn't anything that was worth my time. By gosh, it's sad to see a grown man fail and you just don't want to experience that. Well, I can't have that. I can't let that happen. So what I'm getting at is, despite the tough circumstances, I have got to have some core principles that I can rely on to come out the other side with something that I'm proud of. So here's my most recent demonstration at Comic-Con, doing a charcoal portrait demo of this model. And so here's how it came out. And if you don't mind me saying so, I'm quite pleased with it. It's definitely not my best work, but under the circumstances, I'm very pleased with how it came out. Here's a close-up so we can take a closer look at the features. And so let me get at what I'm doing here that I think will be helpful for you, why I'm telling you this story. Here in our model, we have her local value of flesh tone. Her skin is a uniform flesh tone overall. Then we have the local value of her hair, which is lighter than her skin. Even though she has fair skin, her hair is even lighter, that platinum blonde. And then the shirt is the identical value of her hair. And then she's wearing this dark shawl, which is a darker local value than everything. And by the way, just to be sure we're on the same page, when I use the term value, by that I mean the relative lightness or darkness of the tones that I'm putting down. Okay, so I am doggedly sticking to those values. I'm making sure that no matter what detail or information there is in the hair, that the overall statement is it's a little bit lighter than the flesh tone. Okay, the highlight in the hair is a little lighter than the highlight on the face. The shadow on the hair is a little bit lighter than the shadows on the face, which that hair is the same value overall as the shirt, so I'm keeping that simple. And then overall, no matter what detail, what folds of fabric might be in there, overall that's a darker local value than everything else. I am rigidly sticking to that. My friends, I'm here to tell you that most of you don't do that. Most of you get caught up on, there's this little tone here, and there's this piece of hair here, and here's a little dark patch here, and there's a little thing there, and a little thing there, and you lose the forest for the trees. You get caught up in these individual bits and lose the overall value statement. You just can't let that happen. That is the difference between a failed hopeful, an amateur, and someone who's well on their way to becoming a pro. Same thing with the light and shadow. I'm massing the light clearly because we have a strong point light source here. Even though there's a lot of ambient light in the room, we have a point light source that's stronger than everything else. So I've got to keep my light organized from my shadow. And so that's why I've done this this simplified version for you here. What I've done here is this is a noise reduction filter I've digitally put over it so that it takes out all the detail and texture and just lets us see the simplified value statement. So let's take a look at another one. Back to this one. The guy with the really fun hair. It was a challenge, but a fun challenge to do. And so here's where I went with it. And again, I guess I can't say that it's the finest portrait I've ever done, but I was real pleased with this. I thought we brought some fun to the pose and took advantage of the hair and so forth. And so once again, even though there's a whole lot of ambient light in the room, we put a spotlight on him that was brighter than any other ambient light source, which means that everything in that direct light must be lighter than anything in the shadow. You got that? It's just like if you're out in the sun. You're outdoors, there's all kinds of bounce light, skylight, ambient light everywhere. But that sunlight, that point light source, is a brighter light source than any other ambient light source in the environment. And that's what we've mimicked here by putting a spotlight on our subject. So nothing in the light can be as dark as anything in the shadow, and likewise, nothing in the shadow can be as light as anything in the direct light. And as much ins and outs and turning form as there is in this portrait, I have had to doggedly hold on to that one simple principle. So let's put our noise reduction filter on there to take a look. You see how I've been very careful to keep my light and shadow organized? That's one of the keys. It's one of the secrets to dealing with a very complicated subject. You want to do hair that's complicated like this? Well, sure, get into the fun of it, the ins and outs of it, but doggedly stick to the masses of hair in light and shadow. And so I want to point out, for instance, when I was looking at this model, there was this little bit of light right here, strongly hitting his cheek. And because that bit of ambient light is surrounded by very dark shadow here, very dark shadow here, to my eye, when I looked right at it, it was very bright. When I stared right at it, it felt like it might even be as bright as some of these darker darks that are in the light. But from experience, I knew better to get caught up in that. It wasn't true. And so a little proof of concept here. I went in with a digital brush and selected that value here, because when you look at it, it starts feeling like, uh-oh, we're saying that this is a tone in light. It's starting to feel like it might be getting as dark as this that is a tone in shadow. So we got to double check it. So with my digital brush, I selected that and put it down. Whew, I'm well within the proper range. The darkest part of the light here, the darker part of the light here, the darker part of the light here, even the darkest dark that is indirect light here is still significantly brighter than this lightest part in the shadow. And that's what you've got to watch out for and stick to, so that your portraits are cohesive. So we've talked about this idea in the big challenges of working from life, that what you see with light is a vast value range, especially outside, but it can also be true in the classroom with a very bright spotlight. Here's what we see, but our medium, our stick of charcoal, a beige piece of newsprint paper, is a very limited value range. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that what you can do is this tiny compared to what you can see. So you see the problem there. You see all these nuances with a medium that cannot capture them. And so that's why you have to doggedly stick with this idea of keeping light and shadow clear. So let's do one more. Because I'm really talking about in the class the challenges of working from life. So here I am in a vise. You see the beads of sweat appearing on my brow, desperately hoping I can pull something out of a difficult subject. Everyone looking over my shoulder expect me to come up with something. Oh my gosh, so I'm doing my best here. And so here's what I came out the other side with. And so it's Comic-Con after all. I felt an obligation to be a little bit theatrical. And so once again I set up a strong, even more so in this case, a strong rim light that's a little bit more theatrical. So let's do our noise reduction filter to show how that light and shadow masses, and you can see how I've been exceptionally careful about here's what's in direct light, everything else masses in shadow, and then within that shadow I'm carefully turning form, being as clear and simple as possible about how those big forms turn in space. Clarity and massing of value.